Hello and welcome. It is Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022, otherwise known as 2/22/2022. Either way, lots of twos, lots of 20s, and it's on a Tuesday. 2/2 Tuesday. So, for the show today, it's going to be super football heavy, super quarterback heavy for the show today. We'll get into some news and notes too. Juwan Howard has been suspended, and I'll get into that later. But Michigan themselves have levied a suspension against Juwan Howard, so he's done for. Well, I say he's done. He's out for a bit, and rightfully so. So we'll get into that. We're going to get into some Aaron Rodgers social media posts. He also was on Pat McAfee's show today. Pat McAfee show, great show that runs from, I think, Trevor, if it's 11 to 2 or 10 to 2. I think it's 11 to 2 Central Time. But that's always a good YouTube subscription, Pat McAfee show. Pat and the boys are really, really entertaining. But as for here on BlindEyeLive, we don't get exclusive interviews with Aaron Rodgers, so I guess I'll have to steal from him. So some interesting stuff, and it turns out the Green Bay Packers GM has scheduled a Wednesday press conference. So wonder what that's about. So we'll get into that, and that'll also segue us into my NFL QB market segment, which will also coincide with running into my draft analysis. And I'm sorry the show's late today. I planned on starting it at 3, but I had a little bit of a snag, a little bit of an issue. So, but things are good. Things are running well. And it's also nice to be back to running air conditioning again instead of the heater. I like that. So, that being said, hey there, cat. My cat decides that, when don't have anything going on, he doesn't want my attention. Soon as I start streaming or doing something else, then he wants my attention. Isn't it funny how that works? Huh? Sorry, he's at my feet, and I do not want him biting me right now. You know what happens when you bite me? Not much, except he knows immediately to run under my bed because, he knows he's done wrong immediately. So I don't have to do too much. But I guess we will start off the show. Well, I mean, let's just roll right on into Aaron Rodgers. Is he retiring? A lot of people saying he's retiring with some of the posts he's put out today on Instagram. Put out a post thanking his fiance, or have they gotten married yet? It's either fiance or wife. His significant other. He thanked a bunch of his. He thanked Coach Matt LaFleur, Nathaniel Hackett, who just was going out as offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, some other coaches, and the other quarterbacks who've been in the quarterback room the last couple years, Jordan Love, Kurt Bankett, which is interesting, very interesting. thanked his Friday crew, which sounded like Randall Cobb, maybe his wife, David Bakhtiari. I think maybe Devontae Adams was also part of that, but number of people. And then he had a picture that he posted on his Instagram of the national anthem, or the team, or Devontae Adams and Randall Cobb standing for the national anthem this season. Just so happened to be taken from the Kansas City game, which was the game that he missed. So if you look at any other photo from this year, he stands right in between. Sorry, I got a little bit of itch. Stands right in between Randall Cobb and Devontae Adams. Just a little interesting thing all the social media sleuths out there talking about. So a lot of people are saying, man, he's doing all this thanking people. He's retiring. He's done. I don't think that's it. Don't think that's it at all. I personally, I think that just means he's going. He's out of Green Bay. He's done. He's done with Green Bay. Because these posts were made yesterday evening, I believe, if I'm correct. And then he went on to the Pat McAfee show today and did an interview, which he goes on Pat McAfee show almost every Tuesday. And that was interesting. And he sounds like someone who's on his way out of Green Bay. Now, maybe that's retirement. Maybe it's another team. I think it's another team because he was still excellent this year. He's the MVP of the league again. And I think he's done. Brian Gutekunst. I'm not going to seriously pronounce his name correctly, although that was kind of close, because he's an idiot. I don't think he's necessarily terrible at every other aspect of the job, but he has mismanaged the Aaron Rodgers situation in a massive way. You know, if you're going to move on from Aaron Rodgers, or you think Aaron Rodgers' time is up, I get drafting Jordan Love. But Aaron Rodgers goes on in 2020 to have a awesome MVP caliber year. And then Matt LaFleur and Kevin King botch the Buccaneers game. Although Aaron did have a third down play where it looked like he could have run into the end zone. He chose to throw it and it failed. But then this year, once again, great. And the season starts off rocky. Like that first game against the Saints was not good. Not good at all. But he bounces back, gets better. Yeah, he missed the Kansas City game because of the stupid COVID protocols and all that junk. And I don't blame him for that. I know. Everybody else can. This is America. We're free people. And it's nobody's dang business what he does when it comes to medical stuff. It's none of their business. If you don't like that opinion, that's fine. I'm not going to hold animus towards people over that kind of stuff. I think you're wrong, but I got to live with you, and at some point in the future might have to do business with you, and I'm not going to cut off my nose being rude to people about it. Like so many people have been, dragging Aaron Rodgers through the mud. So Rodgers has a great season, back-to-back MVP, something that I'm trying to remember how many people have done that, to be honest. I don't know if anyone has other than Aaron Rodgers off the top of my head. I'd need to go back and look through all the MVPs, but I'm drawing a blank. And this is his fourth MVP award, which, once again, like, my goodness. This guy's a quality quarterback. And Brian Gutekunst, whatever, he wants it back. The organization. And they've been putting out some stuff. And I think they overplayed their hand. Because they tried to get out in front of this, like, the day of the Super Bowl, I believe it was, like that morning. They're like, our plans are to move forward with Aaron Rodgers, our quarterback. We are committed to Aaron Rodgers, da-da-da-da-da. They're trying to make him look like the bad guy. Because they want him. Obviously, the fans want him there. But the thing is, like, I get it's a past, present, future game. Past is great, but it doesn't matter anymore. The present is incredibly important, but we've also got to worry about the future too, and our best path forward for as many years as possible. The problem is they're in a Super Bowl window. And they were in a Super Bowl window going into 2020, and instead of drafting a player who would have improved their team immediately and for the future, they drafted Jordan Love, who outstanding talents as a quarterback, like traitsy, toolsy, but definitely needed some polish. Didn't look great against Kansas City, but, although a bunch of stuff I am hearing is, like, it's not that he wasn't just impressive against Kansas City. He's not really been impressive in most of the time in practice or when he's been given an opportunity in those kind of scenarios. And for anybody who thinks, oh, it's just practice matters. Practice absolutely matters. Now, it shouldn't preclude you from yanking a guy out of games that's not playing well or handing it over to another player who was, maybe the other guy looked a little better in practice, but they were pretty close. I'm looking at Josh Heupel in the Pittsburgh game and not turning to Hendon Hooker earlier when Joe Milton could not complete a pass to save his life. But whatever. By the way, I like Josh Heupel. I'm super excited for this season, but, sometimes you do need to kind of be quick. Sometimes you just need to make a change. Like Joe Milton, his inability to control his arm on deep throws. It doesn't matter that he's got like this cannon arm, and when he does complete them, they look awesome. He misses too often. Way too often. Far more often than just about any quarterback I've ever seen throwing a football. So when guys are open, like wide open. So anyway, back to Rodgers and the Packers. You drafted Jordan Love, and now Rodgers has no problem with Jordan Love. He's been really awesome about helping him out, and they put him in like that Instagram post, and he's talked Jordan Love up, and he's talked about how I don't want to be, the kind of guy who makes his life hard. He wants to help him. People talk about Aaron Rodgers being a piece of crap. There was some MGM blue checkmark who responded to an Adam Schefter post on Twitter. I can't remember the idiot's name, but said he's still a POS. Like something that has to do with, it was something to do with Rodgers stuff, but it was a pretty tame tweet by Schefter, like nothing controversial about it. And I'm like, yeah, he's such a piece of crap that this guy that they drafted, to replace him, he's going to do everything. He's been doing everything he can to help him. And Jordan Love has said as much. So, and we know how Brett Favre treated Aaron Rodgers. So, as far as I'm concerned, anyone who becomes upset with Aaron Rodgers for choosing to leave, if the Packers really believed in that Super Bowl window that they have, and they seem to believe in right now, why did they draft Jordan Love going into 2020? Now, 2019 wasn't Aaron Rodgers' best season, and there were some things going on, but to me, you don't get to just choose as like a general manager like Gutekunst to start to move on and then say, oh wait, you know what, I made a mistake and I'm sorry I screwed this up. You know, I didn't believe in you, and now it's like, but I believe in you now, please, please, and then get mad when he says, no, screw you. I don't think you get to be that way. Now you can be upset, and it's like, you know, you can admit the mistake, but I can understand Aaron being like, well, what's going to happen? Like, maybe he's like Brady and he plays into his mid-40s. When does it happen again? And I do believe when you've got a player that great who's been that good for your franchise, it's hard for me to say you don't owe it to them to treat them better. It's just like the way Andre Johnson went out of the league. I think was a load of crap. I think what the Texans did with him was just despicable. Same with Detroit with Calvin Johnson. You know, the Colts treated Andrew Luck right. Of course, they didn't. You know, he retired early. It's a little different, but look at the Cardinals with Larry Fitzgerald. I'm not like completely all player empowerment. Like, I've had some opinions about the NBA. I think some of these guys, like what James Harden did last year, was just ridiculous. I'd say the same thing with Ben Simmons. Like, Ben Simmons has been a baby. James Harden's being a baby again. Who would have thought? Luckily, it got Ben Simmons into a good situation for him, developmentally speaking. Like, well, I say developmentally. He's not going to develop any further because he's obviously proven that he doesn't care about developing any further. And he wants everything catered to him. Well, it's very obvious he's not going to be the alpha here. Because you've got Kevin Durant, you've got Kyrie Irving, and you've got a bunch of really good veteran players on this team. Like, you know, Simmons is not going to be the alpha, but maybe he's okay with that with Kevin Durant. And he might have just not liked Daryl Morey. Who knows? May have been annoyed with Doc Rivers, and maybe he and Joel Embiid it was done. But Joel was the alpha player. We'll see how that works out. And we'll see how James Harden works out in Philadelphia. But in the NFL, it's a little different because in the NBA, your contracts are fully guaranteed. Like, unless you agree to a non-guaranteed deal, like most contracts, fully guaranteed. Especially the elite players, like their contracts fully guaranteed. In the NFL, Kirk Cousins is the only person I can remember who signed a fully guaranteed contract. He's the only one. And he took a little total money off to get that full guarantee for the entirety of like that deal. But I mean, that was a first. In the NFL, most players don't have don't have all the money in those contracts. So you see, oh, so and so signed a $40 million per year contract. It's like, yeah, but not all of that's guaranteed. Now quarterbacks tend to get all that money because usually if they're signing a deal that big, they're worth it. Typically. But at other positions, like you look at a lot of guys, they don't get the non-guaranteed portions of their contracts. And the guys who are good enough to do that typically are unhappy because at that point they're underpaid compared to the guys at their level. Like Stephon Gilmore, the last couple years, I believe was a little under, or at least this past year was. I need to look at that again. But like Aaron Rodgers right now is underpaid. So is Russell Wilson. Like they're both in like the 20s, I think. Rodgers might be around 30 million, but I think he's somewhere in the 20-something million. Russell Wilson I think Russell Wilson's guaranteed money's out. I think he counts like 23 million this year. Or most of his guaranteed money's like done, already paid. So I just find it hard to believe that the Packers, or I think anyone in the media who's going to drag Aaron Rodgers over this decision, whatever. And I hear a lot of people complaining or saying like, I saw people talking about Aaron Rodgers being a choke artist. It's like most of the people who use the term choke don't even know what choke means because of the way they use it. Everybody who doesn't win the Super Bowl choked. Heck, even if you've won a Super Bowl, apparently Aaron Rodgers is a choke artist who doesn't show up in the biggest games, even though he's won a Super Bowl and was awesome in that Super Bowl. And beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl, which, if I'm remembering correctly, the Steelers have lost one time if they've made it to the Super Bowl, and it was to Aaron Rodgers. So, And some people bring up like different playoff records, whatever. Football is a team sport. There are a lot of elite quarterbacks. Dan Marino made it to one Super Bowl, got beat by, in his second season, got beat by one of the most talented teams, especially compared to the rest of the league at the time. The 49ers back in the 80s, there was no salary cap in the 80s. By the way, there was no salary cap until the 90s. There was no free agency until the 90s. It was a lot easier to keep elite teams together. And when you were Bill Walsh and you were just better at evaluating talent than everybody else, at a time when the draft went like a ridiculous number of rounds, more than 7, by the way. And he was really great in trades and finding values that way. And and Bill Walsh is one of the best quarterback evaluators of all time. He's the reason Ken Anderson ended up the starting quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, and Ken Anderson was like the prototype for the modern quarterback, especially like quick passing game West Coast quarterback. Like he walked so Joe Montana could run, and they played against each other in a Super Bowl after Bill Walsh took the head coaching job with the 49ers, where he'd been the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati. Joe was a third-round pick, but he had everything that Bill Walsh coveted in a quarterback for his scheme. And then after Steve Young had kind of been a bit of a bust in Tampa Bay, he traded for Steve Young while he still had Joe Montana, and he developed Steve Young in the background. And Steve Young, when Joe Montana got hurt, played an important stretch of games for them during their 4th Super Bowl run under Walsh. Montana played in the Super Bowl, but they did win, and it was partially because of Steve Young. And then they eventually traded Montana, and Young took over as starter, and he was arguably the best quarterback of the decade of the 90s. Sorry, Troy Aikman. Sorry, Favre. Sorry, Dan Marino. I'd take Steve Young over any of them. And also during that time, Bill Walsh sent Mike Lombardi, a future long-time NFL executive, and a very, very interesting guy. I love to listen to him talk football. he sent him to scout a little known uh, option quarterback out of the University of Delaware named Rich Gannon, who most teams wanted to convert to safety or like DB or like another position. And Rich Gannon said, no, I don't want to do that. Stayed as a quarterback, bounced around the league for a bit, played a little bit for the Minnesota Vikings, but eventually, while Mike Lombardi is in Oakland, they hire this coach, John Gruden, and they give Rich Gannon a shot. And all Rich Gannon does is have like this crazy stretch in his mid to late 30s, wins an MVP award at like 37, 38 or whatever, and they go to the Super Bowl while he's throwing to receivers Jerry Rice and uh, Tony Brown, who were, like 40 plus, or Brown might have been like 39 and Jerry Rice was like 41. Like, it was stupid. It was stupid. And they were running that West Coast offense, like killing people on slants. And the quick intermediate passing game. But the thing was, for the 49ers, even when they brought in Steve Young, it was because, to a degree, Montana was having some back issues already flare up. But quarterbacks are a great commodity, so developing them, they're assets that you can flip for more stuff, and he was a devalued asset. Steve Young was a devalued asset. But it was clear that Montana was the guy until it was time that they felt like Montana was done. And they made the right move, moving to Young. But Joe wasn't ready to retire, and Joe felt betrayed. And to be honest, it's totally understandable. And people can say, and agree with me and be like me and be like, well, it was the right move for the franchise. But it doesn't mean that the player who's giving you everything, that's one of the greats of all time, one of the greatest in your franchise, he still had it, and he wanted to keep going. And it's possible that they would have won that Super Bowl that they won with Steve Young if they'd kept Montana. But it's also possible they wouldn't have. Steve Young had one of the greatest Super Bowl performances of all time. And Steve Young had an awesome season that year. Montana still ended up being very successful with Kansas City. But I see a bunch of Niners fans who are really salty with Joe Montana or recently over something similar, because he came out in defense of Jimmy Garoppolo. This is not long after Jeff Garcia had come out in defense of Jimmy Garoppolo. But Montana said some things about Trey Lance. And people saw it as bitterness, and why is he doing this, and he needs to get over it, And it's like, Montana doesn't have to get over anything. And Montana can be right. I love Trey Lance, the prospect, but I'm not there every day. I don't have access to whatever. He might have more access than I do. He might have ends with the 49ers coaching staff. I don't know. He could be blowing smoke. But we do see what Jimmy Garoppolo's done on Sundays, and we've seen a little bit of Trey Lance. And, I thought Lance was going to need time too, so this isn't a shock to me. But Steve Young has since come out and given a similar, he's given a similar defense for Jimmy Garoppolo and take on that situation. So, reason I bring all that up is Young got to retire a Niner. Montana didn't. And, was the organization wrong? Did they handle it wrong? Now, I don't know how they handled it behind the scenes, really. Like, that happened either around the time or right before I was born. Like, I wasn't a football fan yet. I wasn't, I might not have been alive yet. Um, but Montana has every right to be pissed. Just like Aaron Rodgers has every right to be pissed. The last 2 drafts have been 2 of the greatest receiver drafts ever. Heck, the last 3, 2019 was an awesome receiver draft. Yeah, Marquise Brown was the only one that went in the first round, but that second round, A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, those guys all were first round talents. A.J. Brown was my number 1 receiver. DK Metcalf was my number 2. Deebo was my number 3. And there were some other good ones in 2019. 2020, and what did the Packers do in 2019? I'm trying to, I can't remember. Was 2019? That was Rashawn Gary and Darnell Savage, which Savage worked out really great. Really good safety. Gary has improved, and he popped off this year. 2020, though, you draft Jordan Love, and you moved up for him. If I remember correctly, they moved up to get him. They could have drafted an offensive lineman. They could have drafted a receiver. I'm trying to think of what... Now, I believe most of my favorite guys were off the board already, first-round guys, but there were some pretty good second-round guys. Or if you were going to move up, you could have moved up for a receiver. I would have to look at the board again. But I don't know. It's really hard for me to sit here and say that. But even if it wasn't an offensive player, anyone who could have played at any position would have been a better pick than Jordan Love from winning a Super Bowl while Aaron Rodgers is still under contract. $2021, and of course this year, they don't draft a receiver till the 3rd round. They draft Amari Rodgers, who I like, but they'd already signed Randall Cobb in free agency. If I'm not mistaken, they'd already brought back Randall Cobb, which, I mean, his health's not wasn't a given, but he's a slot receiver. Amari Rodgers is a slot receiver. And I don't think he had much of a role this year. And they've drafted some other receivers, but they've done a poor job in evaluating talent for one. And to be honest, I don't know if their medical staff's very good at scouting players who have injury issues. Because, I mean, I'm just looking at their receiver draft picks in general. Aquemia St. Brown was a athletic specimen, but he wasn't a very good receiver in college, from a technical standpoint. He's done nothing in the league. Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's really fast, but his hands are iffy, and he's had some injury or some soft tissue injury problems, if I'm not mistaken. Geronimo Allison was a talented guy, but couldn't stay healthy or play consistently when he was healthy. And then they've let guys like Jeff Janis was I mean, it's not like he was a huge player or whatever, but he was more consistent than any of those guys. They just didn't put him on the field very often. But he had a couple really big games, and one of them was in a playoff game. And people talking about Rodgers not coming up clutch, he's had some crazy duels, a couple different crazy games with the Cardinals where in the postseason where it wasn't his fault they lost. The defense didn't hold up their end of the bargain. He kept putting the ball in the end zone. And I would argue I didn't like the Aaron Jones contract last year. and he wasn't as good this year, and I'm not shocked. And personally, like, I love that they had drafted AJ Dillon. AJ Dillon was a favorite of mine in the 2020 class, but that was still also a thing where it's like, uh, man, because 2020 they also drafted that tight end, what was it, Jason DeGuara, like really high, who some people were high on, but I had like a day 3 grade on. I thought he was like a 5th, 6th round guy, and I think they drafted him in the 3rd round. Like, what are you doing? So this year, I mean, your picks are Eric Stokes, which, and I criticized that one. Eric Stokes fit their scheme perfectly. Once again, just because someone doesn't do amazing in some combine drill and maybe looks a little stiff on tape doesn't mean that, depending on what role you give him, that he can't play well. Stokes fit in perfectly into their scheme. And actually, that shouldn't have shocked any of us. His skills plus that scheme, and having Jair Alexander. Although Alexander, I think, missed a decent amount of time this year to injury, if I'm remembering correctly. Don't have everything in front of me right now. But beyond that, the Rodgers pick in the 3rd round, there were other receivers on the board who probably were more dynamic and would have fit better outside. And in the 2nd round, they could have drafted a more dynamic receiver like Dyami Brown for starters, or Nico Collins, who the Texans drafted. Although Collins kind of fits into some of the receivers they missed on, like where, he's big, long, and fast, but his production's not always matched or whatever. Although Collins cut some weight and he really looked better during the spring, during the Senior Bowl. Like, he really popped. But there were, and, like I said, hard to fault. The Eric Stokes pick was great. But you had guys like Elijah Moore. You want to talk about, if you're going to draft a slot guy, draft a guy like Elijah Moore who's dynamic out of the slot and can play outside. Also, Terrace Marshall. Like, maybe move up in the 2nd round and snag Terrace Marshall. I'm blanking on who their 2nd round pick was, or if they had a 2nd round pick. I remember their 2nd round pick now, because it was it was dumb. They drafted a center that wasn't Creed Humphrey, who was on the board. What is it? Josh Myers, I believe, center out of Ohio State, who I had a 5th round grade on. I think I had a day 3 grade on him. I had a center that was graded higher than him that went in the 6th round. I had multiple centers graded higher than him. Creed Humphrey, I had a 1st round grade on. Because I'd watched him for several years at Oklahoma, and he was the best center in college football. Well, him or Landon Dickerson. Take your pick. But they're kind of two different animals, because Dickerson's huge. And Humphrey's like a smaller, or is smaller. Like, they have different games, but they're both really, really smart. But Creed's just whip smart. They could have taken him. They didn't. I know some of the guys I named, like Moore and Marshall, were off the board by the 62nd pick. I'd have traded up. To try and get a guy like Terrace Marshall. Marshall would have been perfect for their offense. because he's a better version of some of the wideouts they'd been taking, and a more complete wideout than a lot of those guys. Like, a guy who's like just like 6'3", or maybe like an eighth of an inch under 6'3", 211 pounds, whatever. Really easy long speed. He doesn't. I mean, he's got a quicker first step than some people give him credit for, but it's more his build up speed. But once he builds up speed, like by the time he's, you know, by the time he's broke out of that post, he's gone. He's leaving people behind. Great long strider. He runs great routes. He's got a great blend of power and finesse in his game. Like, thought the Cardinals did a great job snagging him in the second round. Thought he was a great value because, personally, he had the talent to go first round. But these are things like, we look at the draft slots. He went there in the second, whatever. I just don't think the Packers have maximized the value of their picks. And Myers could end up working out really well long term, but there were other centers that I think had the ability to work out just as well, or honestly better, that went later. And Myers should have gone later. Like, he's going to have to be really good to justify the 62nd pick. And he'll always be known as the guy who got drafted a pick before Creed Humphrey at the same position. I mean, heck, I thought Landon Dickerson going like 36 to the Eagles or whatever it was a great selection. Like, no issue with that pick at all. And right now, I mean, even that looks like maybe you should have gone with Creed Humphrey. Even, like, I mean, Dickerson's going to have to be really great long term because it looks like Humphrey's going to be, like, right there in the all-pro discussion for the, as long as he's lacing up. So, and the Chiefs got that with the 63rd pick. That front office is just... So, if Rodgers is leaving, because, like, the whole point of saying that is Gutekunst hasn't, done a great job of managing asset, or hasn't maximized all his assets. Although he's done some pretty good stuff in free agency, but, I mean, already Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith, this was what, season 3 for them, I think. Or at the very least, maybe it's been 2. Man, see, 2020 and 2021 just were so long, felt so long. It's like, there's a lot of talk that both of them are not going to make it. They're both going to get cut by the Packers. They put a bunch of money into those two guys the same offseason. And maybe they keep one of them or whatever. But it's going to be interesting to see how they use that cap space again. Because that offseason, they signed those two guys, Adrian Amos, and then there was an offensive lineman that they overpaid like hell. And I'm trying to remember, was it Ross Tucker? I'm trying to remember the name of the guy. But that one was kind of And you just look at some of the other draft picks, like they spent a 3rd-round pick on Jay Sternberger, who was a guy I believed in, and he didn't develop. Part of it was he started off with a pretty rough injury his rookie year, but he's just never he just hasn't panned out so far. And that might have something to do with him too, but I mean, the Degura pick looks really bad. Like, really bad right now. And we'll see with Rodgers, because Rodgers can step up, but he's still, once again, like, he's a slot receiver, and I don't know if he's, like, he might be a high-end slot receiver. And people say like Kadarius Toney and Elijah Moore are slot receivers, but they're more dynamic players. And Moore is the shortest of those three guys. He actually has outside, like he has perimeter skills. And Toney has like crazy acceleration, like crazy movement. Same with Elijah Moore. Rodgers built a lot like a running back because he's like 5'11", like 215, and he's got that running back. He's got a running back lower body build. He doesn't have the top end speed of those other two guys. Which some of the stuff with 40s and stuff can be overstated, but Rodgers isn't like a guy who can beat you over the top. Toney and Moore can. And Moore's got really good ball skills, too. He's got better 50-50 ball skills than people give him credit for. So, I don't know. That said, if Rodgers is leaving Green Bay, and I don't believe for a second he's retiring, where is he going? And this will start our NFL quarterback market. This will start the quarterback market talk. A lot of people have been talking about Denver, and people were talking about Denver last year too. Denver has some interesting young players. They've got picks, or I think they're going to be they're the type of team that should offer picks because they have a lot of talent. And they might not have to surrender much of that talent either. They might be able to just do it with picks. But, I mean, you look at Denver's... Let's just quickly run through some just interesting players on Denver's roster. You've got, on offense, Javonte Williams, who I love. He was my running back 2 behind Najee Harris in this past draft. And one of the reasons is Najee's just bigger and stronger. I like big, strong backs. And some people disagree on this. Najee Harris was also arguably the best receiving running back in last year's class, not named Kenneth Gainwell. I think he's better in the passing game than Williams. But Williams is really good, or can be really good there. But Harris has made some plays in his time in college that were like receiver level, like spectacular catches. Like he's a downfield threat and can make contested plays. And I don't like. Yeah, Williams can run a really good wheel route and he'll catch the ball downfield, but Kenneth Gainwell has like receiver skills. Najee has some receiver skill, and I don't see Williams that way. But Williams is a really great running back. Melvin Gordon's going to leave Denver. He won't re-sign because he knows he's going to play second fiddle to Javonte Williams, and he said last week that he's not interested in taking a back seat to anyone. So, have fun with that, Melvin, because there are very few teams that are going to want to pay you what you're looking for. Because I don't think anyone's wanting to feature Melvin Gordon. Now, I might be wrong. I mean, he probably would upgrade the Jets running back room, even with Michael Carter there. I'm trying to think of who else. Like he would have been better than any of the Atlanta Falcons running backs this past season. But he's going to be part of a timeshare wherever, and he goes, and that might be with a rookie running back that team also drafts. or a young running back that they've drafted. So, and we'll see if Gordon continues to we'll see if he regresses any this year. But they got Javonte Williams. I think Royce Freeman's still under contract. That's a good change of pace back. Their receiving core, Cortland Sutton, when healthy, is a really good, downfield possession receiver, over the middle possession receiver. I say possession, he's a really good 50-50 guy too. A couple seasons ago when Joe Flacco was playing a lot of quarterback there, Sutton was actually the most prolific and efficient receiver on deep posts in the league. He was dominating on those routes. So Sutton's a big physical receiver. Loved him when he was coming out. He was a great pick by them in the second round. They've got Jerry Jeudy, who some people are kind of disappointed by. He's had good numbers through his first 2 seasons, considering the quarterback play. And offensive scheme and some of that stuff. Judy's really good. I think we've yet to see his best, and I don't think that's all on him. I think most of that's been on his situation. You got CJ Hamler, or is it CJ Hamler? KJ Hamler, who I love. He was a second round pick last year, and he's got speed to burn. Who is their other receiver? Was it Fowler? Benny Fowler or something like that? I'm trying to remember who this possession third receiver that's really popped for them. That's kind of kept Hamler down. Man. And they got a couple other guys that are kind of interesting. Tight end, you've got Noah Fant, you've got Albert O. Fant, when he's been healthy, he's awesome. He's got top 5 in the league potential. Albert O is a really, really good second, tight end, especially in the passing game and red zone weapon. Their offensive line is good. Garrett Bowles has developed in the left tackle that they drafted him to be. They got Dalton Risner like him. Lloyd Cushenberry looked better in year 2 at center. And that defense, Bradley Chubb is awesome. They've got extra picks from the Von Miller trade, second and third round picks out of that. So they're going to get to, the Broncos are going to get to have some fun there. But it also depends on what it takes to get Rodgers. So they have extra picks to play with to get Rodgers. They have Patrick Surtain, who looked great in year 1. Not a shock. Jonathan Simmons is one of the best safeties in the NFL. They've got other pieces on defense. They got to figure out middle linebacker. They got a number of guys who are slated to be free agents, but they'll bring back at least one. I think they'll bring back at least 2 of those guys. I think they can get A.J. Johnson. I think they can easily re-sign A.J. Johnson, Josie Jewell, and they should do it. And still probably draft another. You need more than 2 off-ball linebackers. And they need someone who's a little more athletic and rangy than Johnson and Jewell. As much as I love both of those guys. So yeah, the Broncos are ready-made. Because, look at how good this... Vic Fangio got fired. And it was because the offense wasn't going anywhere, or was not improving. And part of it was scheme, too. Sorry, I've forgotten his name, but I didn't love the offensive coordinator. To some degree, I don't fully agree with Fangio getting fired. You should have just tried to get another offensive coordinator, but sometimes to get the best offensive minds, you got to pluck them from another team by giving them the head coaching job. Now, sometimes you can do that because, this guy's trying to break through as a head coaching candidate, and it's well, I'm the offensive coordinator for this offensive guru who calls the plays, and I'm one of the reasons I didn't get needed or these jobs, or I'm not getting these calls, or even when I do, I'm not getting the job, is because I don't have play calling experience. So like, why would we hire you as our head coach if you haven't even been like a really full-fledged offensive coordinator yet? So I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to think, or for some of those, um, or when you're asking those questions, they bring in Nathaniel Hackett, who's been Matt LaFleur's offensive coordinator. So there's the connection right there to Aaron Rodgers. Sorry, I'm like trying to figure out. Something seems off with my camera. Okay, I think I'm looking at it now. Okay, so Hackett has been quarterback's coach, offensive coordinator for Aaron Rodgers. There's that connection ready-made. We know exactly what offensive system is going to be in place there. Javonte Williams is perfect for that system. They've got plenty of weapons to really elevate that system. Hamler and Judy are guys who you can run on end rounds, using the screen game creatively, just get the ball in their hands. They're not physical like a Deebo Samuel, but speed and agility wise, those guys are. Well, Judy ran a faster 40 time than Samuel. And his agility drill numbers, I think, were better. But he's not powerful like Samuel. Hamler's smaller than both of them. Like, Hamler's a small guy, but just super fast, quick, easy acceleration. And he's a jitterbug too. They've got weapons, and they've got tight ends for that system too, in Fant, Alberto. And I think it fits their offensive line due to, especially like Bowles is a really, agile lineman for that zone scheme, or for the kind of the zone-based schemes that they run and the counter stuff that they run. I just think it's a good fit. And Hackett's coming from a Packers team whose defense, or at least like some of the base defense principles, are kind of similar to Fangio's. And I think, we'll see. But the Broncos are obviously like right up there because the Broncos need a QB. They do. Drew Lock just doesn't seem like he's going to be he's not developing, or he's not really improving in the way I think a lot of people had hoped. Some of it's been because of injuries, and Teddy Bridgewater's a solid quarterback, but if you can't beat out Teddy Bridgewater in year 3, you're probably bouncing around the league. But he'll be a better backup than in my opinion, or a higher ceiling backup than most teams or have had. Like, I think he's a high ceiling type backup. Maybe a low floor at times backup. But if you can get Lock in there, I think because of his talents, he could have some flash games. But Locke has also not had the benefit of... Locke hadn't had the benefit of being under a great offensive coach either. So, we'll see. So that's option 1 for Rodgers and other quarterbacks, because maybe the Broncos don't get Rodgers. Maybe they take a swing at Watson. I think Watson's too rich, or at least what the Texans are asking for. The Texans are asking for 3 first-round picks Just because you ask for it doesn't mean you'll get it. And we have had our first offer in the Watson sweepstakes, apparently. Um, Another team that's definitely in the QB market, the Washington now Commanders, the Washington Commies, appropriately red and yellow, just like a communist flag. They are, they have offered the Texans allegedly Chase Young, their first round pick, their second round pick, and a third round pick next year for Deshaun Watson. So that's looking like our floor offer. That is an elite generational talent at, or edge rusher, the 11th pick in the draft, a second round pick, and a future third. I think that's like, or that pick's going to be around 40 or the low 40s in the second round. So top half of the second round. And I don't know if that's enough for Watson. We'll see. I mean, you'd have to consider it. And to be honest, right now, Houston's getting nothing out of Watson. If I could get my heir to J.J. Watt, I can get the 11th pick, which maybe we turn around and... Because we have... What pick do they have? Is it 4 or is it 3? I'm trying to remember the order. They've got the 3rd pick. That gives you the ability to maybe move around and do some things. Like maybe you decide to move up and have 2 like picks in the top 10 if there's some guy you really, really want. Or you use that 11th pick and then trade down. Because there's a lot of value. I think there are a lot of really, really interesting players that, and they have needs everywhere. Trade down, pick up more picks. But I still feel like someone's going to be willing to give them more. I do think someone's going to be willing to give them more. Because Young's already been in the league 2 years now. So his rookie deal, you've got 2 years of cost control and then like that 5th year option, which is more expensive, or now is more expensive than it was like before this latest collective bargaining agreement. Would you rather just have a pick? And then it also depends, like, how much would Young go on the trade market himself? Like, is Washington saying he's worth 2 first-round picks? Because they might. And, I mean, he was a number 2 pick, and I'd be completely honest, it's not outlandish to say that Chase Young's worth 2 first-round picks in value. Because he is still cost control for the next 2 seasons. Like, he's very much underpaid. So it just depends on how much the Texans, or what the Texans want. But I'd probably rather have 2 first-round picks than him. Sorry, let me readjust so I can see chat over here. Yeah, I don't understand what y'all are putting in the chat over here. Guessing these are bots, but anyway, thanks for tuning in, even if you're bots. Appreciate any viewers. So Washington's in play for a quarterback, and Washington might be willing to throw out multiple picks for Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson. obviously and it seems like if they're willing to offer Chase Young, maybe they don't like Chase Young's attitude in the building. After what happened between him and Jonathan Allen in a game where Young had no stats at the end of the season, or it was that Cowboys game that they just got blown the heck out. Jonathan Allen was still a presence in that game, and Young goes over, puts his finger in his face, like pokes him in the face, and then Allen stands up and he starts chirping back, and Allen hits him or swings at him. I don't blame Allen because he was provoked necessarily. Or I don't necessarily blame Allen because he's provoked, but you got to handle yourself better. But it is kind of. So let's just go down all the teams in need of quarterbacks. I think Denver's a prime, or is a really good destination, depending on what they have to give up to get somebody. But I think they're going to be a team that's aggressive. Washington needs to be aggressive. Taylor Heineke's not the guy. And Ryan Fitzpatrick's not either, especially after that injury. I think he's done. Maybe as a backup fill-in, but he's not. Okay, we're going to get a league average starter out of this. Someone who's not going to lose us games or whatever. I think that's over for Fitzpatrick. And I hate to say that. He's been a fun player for a long time, one of the best personalities in the game. But Washington's got to do something. Because they have talent. They have guys. But they've got to have a quarterback that raises the ceiling. And I don't know if that guy's in this draft. I love Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett will fail in Washington, I believe. And I'm worried about Pickett. The tape is great, but there is a shift when you go from college to the pros. Hand size matters to a degree. Most of the time when you hear his hands are a little small, it's because his hands are in the low 9-inch category. He's got sub 9-inch hands. I have tiny hands, even for my size. I'm not a big guy, but I've got my hands are the same size as my 5'2" mother. Apparently, that's the one genetic thing that I got from her that I didn't inherit from my father. It made it hard as I got, and the fact that I maxed out at 5'8". I have a really good mind. Well, that and the whole, my started going blind thing. The higher up you get in years playing football, the ball gets bigger. And the college ball was not a problem for Kenny Pickett. He spun it great last year and in the rain. But down in Mobile, he was playing with the NFL ball, and the NFL ball is bigger than the college ball. And for some guys, it does matter because it can affect your ability to catch it, especially in adverse weather. That football is harder to hold on to. It's harder to catch. It sounds dumb because you're yeah, but is it really that big a deal? When you're getting to the highest levels of sport and higher levels of competition, every little thing has an outsized impact, unfortunately. And I have some reservations about Kenny's hands. Now, when things were the first day, it wasn't rainy, but it was pretty windy. He was pretty good. Didn't look great in the rain the second day. Looked great when they went indoors the third day. And then he looked really good during the game. Or during the Senior Bowl. And to some degree, that's what matters. The problem is we haven't seen him play with an NFL-sized ball. To be honest, I feel like the college and pro ball should be about the same size because by the time you're going to the NFL from college, for the most part, you're physically developed. By the time you're 21, you might grow another inch. you definitely have some more weight, and there's things like you're not really fully as a dude done physically developing until you're like, in a lot of cases, like 24, 25. And in some ways, even later, depending on if you're early or late bloomer or whatever. His hand size, I think, is a little concerning because he's the first quarterback I can remember who's declined to have his hand size checked at the Senior Bowl. Now, there are always discrepancies between the Senior Bowl and the Combine, and it's really weird. Because apparently there's different ways of measuring it or something. But he plays with gloves, which isn't necessarily a total issue, but it is a rarity. Like, I can't remember a whole lot of like elite quarterbacks that played with gloves an extended period of time. So I don't know. But Pickett has my highest tape grade of any quarterback in the class. So in one way, he should be the most NFL ready quarterback. But I am worried about the hand size. I am. And I usually am someone who throws that out the door. So this is a real abnormal thing for me. Like, this is not something that I usually focus on. Because usually it's not that big a deal. But for him, it might be. Because I'll say, if I'm not mistaken, Jared Goff's hands come in on the small side. And he's had issues. That being said, he's my top rated guy, so he's the guy that fits where Washington's drafting. I wouldn't be shocked, though. Like, I think a lot of teams have Malik Willis rated high because of his tools. A lot of people don't realize, though, that he's basically as old as Kenny Pickett or close to it. Like, Kenny Pickett, this was his... I can't remember if this was like his 5th year starting games. This might have been his 6th year in college. But Pickett's been around the block. So is Malik Willis. He was a redshirt senior this year as well. He's 23. To put that in perspective, Lamar Jackson won an MVP at a younger age than Malik Willis is right now. So he's more developed than a lot of project quarterbacks. So I don't know. But I see a lot of people with Malik Willis that high. I've seen mock drafts with Malik Willis going to Washington. I'm not a huge fan of that. But how about I list the teams and then go, or from here and then go through them? We've already gone over Denver. I've been talking about Washington. Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Steelers are obviously in the market with Ben gone. The Saints are in the market, and they're going to be an interesting point because they're at 19, I think, or 18. I think they pick at 18. And it might be for the teams that are in the 20s, if they have a guy they like a lot, they need to get ahead of the Saints in the first round. The Eagles could be looking at a quarterback. I think they're going to roll with Jalen Hurts if they don't trade for Deshaun Watson. I don't think they're trading for Aaron Rodgers. They might be interested in Russell Wilson, but I think if they're trading for someone, they're just going to pony up and they're going to go for Deshaun Watson. The Carolina Panthers obviously need to be in the market for a quarterback. They've been talked about a ton in connection with Watson. They're not going to go for Rodgers. And I don't think they're interested in Russell Wilson either. I think they're wanting a younger quarterback. And Watson is young and established. Some people might think the Browns need to. No, that they need to stick it out with Baker for at least this year. I still believe in Baker, personally. I think he's been an average to above average starter for at this point. Like, they're not going to upgrade on him easily, so you stick with him. Because I think, especially not with a younger quarterback, and I think they should just build around him because they've been good. I mean, just in 2020, they had the best season they've had in my lifetime, basically, or just about my entire lifetime. And I just turned 29. And they won a playoff game. The Browns won a playoff game. 2020. Yeah, this year didn't go as planned. They dealt with a lot of injuries. There were a lot of things that happened. Don't overreact. Don't overcorrect. Like, I still think Baker's the guy there. The Bears, obviously, Justin Fields is, in year 2, they've got to go with Justin Fields out the gate. So, maybe they get some kind of veteran backup, but they're not trading for anyone. The Vikings need to stick with Kirk Cousins. I don't understand all this talk. I don't understand all the Kirk Cousins hate. The only thing the Bears should do is the only reason they should trade Justin Fields is if they can get just Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers and probably just one of Watson or Wilson, and that Fields is worth a ton to those two teams. That they're not having to give up a whole ton of assets. Because they're also rebuilding other parts of that team. Like, they can't afford to just throw a bunch of picks around. It would be stupid. It would be ignorant. Like, they're rebuilding. So, when it comes to the veteran quarterbacks, Watson, Rodgers, Wilson, your teams are Washington, Carolina. Even though I think Carolina, it's pretty much only in on Watson. Well, I mean, just going through them. We talked about Denver. Denver should look at all of them. Denver should be in play for all of them. But I think especially Rodgers, because I think Rodgers, it's a really good fit for him, but it should be a good fit for all of them. The Eagles, if they're going to go, it needs to be Wilson or Watson, and I think I would go with Watson over Wilson at this point, just myself. But if Watson goes somewhere else and you can get Wilson at a decently cheaper rate, I would take him and move on from Hurts personally. For Washington, obviously, they seem to be interested in Watson. They should be interested in all of those, or in any of those quarterbacks. I think that'd be a fit. Carolina, like I said, I think it's Watson or nothing for them. I think they'd maybe Wilson. I don't think Rodgers is on their timetable. But then again, Rodgers could turn their timetable around. Like, that defense looked elite at the beginning of the season, and they have a lot of great receiving weapons. They've got Christian McCaffrey, although McCaffrey could be involved in a move to get one of these quarterbacks. So that would be interesting to look at. And Pittsburgh, I think Pittsburgh's going to draft a QB. They highly value their draft picks, like their first round picks, and it should say a lot that they traded up for Devin Bush, but they still, that was a first round pick, and I don't think they used I can't remember if they used a future first to trade up, but they traded Minkah Fitzpatrick, or they trade. No, wait. Almost broke there. They did trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, but that's one of the reasons right now they're highly valuing their first round picks, because they have traded draft assets to target guys or get guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick, moving up for Devin Bush. So right now, Kevin Colbert is on his way out, and he's looking to leave the franchise in the best position possible moving forward. So I think he's going to try and set them up at quarterback, and he's going to try not to destroy their cupboard of picks moving forward. So I could see the Steelers trading up ahead of New Orleans and moving into the teens to try and target a quarterback. I think the Los Angeles Chargers would be an interesting team for them to partner with. And depending on what the Eagles do with all their picks, the Eagles, you've got so many first round picks right there, and you're rebuilding. Like, they made the playoffs as a rebuilding team because their roster was that talented. Was talented enough to be one of the middle of the road teams. They also were in a division that went kind of weird as well, because I thought Washington was going to be better. But that's because I thought Fitzpatrick was going to play the whole season, and I thought he was an upgrade on Alex Smith. But they had some other issues as well. I expected the Giants to be bad because I didn't believe in their coaching staff, and I don't believe in Daniel Jones. And their offensive line was crap in 2020, and they basically did very little to change that going into 2021. The Cowboys were about what I expected. So, I mean, the Eagles managed to squeak in to the playoffs, and they've got 3 first-round picks in a really good draft for them to snag the things that they need, in my opinion, in that window. Although Snacks Gardner's rise up the board maybe hurts them, like in getting a value cornerback there. But there are other good corners in this draft. Let me think here. If we're talking, man, I've already been going like an hour 20. If we're talking, I think the Eagles could part with one of, they've got 15, 16, and 19, I believe. They could part with 16 if the Steelers wanted to move up, or if someone else wanted to move up. I think the Chargers could trade down just because I think where they're drafting, their biggest needs, in my opinion, or the guys in that range that I think are the most valuable to them or will improve a position the most for them, are like Jordan Davis at nose tackle. And I think the Chargers are one of like 2 teams that would, maybe 3 teams that would consider drafting Jordan Davis in the first round. And he's a first round talent. I think he's that kind of nose tackle. But I'd rather trade down and take him in the 20s than take him at 17, personally. And also at offensive tackle, I think there's going to be several guys available through there. Like, I think the middle of the first round is where Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa starts looking good. And I think getting a bookend on the other side from Rashawn Slater for the Chargers would solidify that offensive line like in a big way. And that'll help Justin Herbert more than basically anything. Because Slater was a huge boon for them. You get Penning, he's a starting right tackle. I think from the jump. Other than him, you've also got Bernard Raymond out of Central Michigan, who's really risen up. I love his hand power. Like, he's got real pop in his hands. And really good core strength. Like, his tapes, I've been digging into him, and I really like him. And he should be available in the back end of the first round. So the Chargers could move down and get one of those guys. Although they could just take Penning at 17. but they could trade down. So I think the Steelers are drafting a quarterback. I don't think they're in for one of the veterans. And they're a really good team, but I think they're looking long term, and they're not going to be willing to give up the draft assets to get one of those veterans, in my opinion. Which leaves New Orleans, New Orleans is the wild card. To me, they have their cap sheet is insanity, but Mickey Loomis is a cap wizard, so I'll let him figure it out. They might have to make some tough choices, but they still have an extremely talented roster. What held them back this year was a combination of injuries and bad QB play because the best of their QBs got hurt. And while they were really good at the beginning of the season, and Winston was kind of efficient, his numbers weren't insane. Like, that first game against the Packers, there were touchdowns, but, like, he didn't do a whole lot with, like, yardage-wise. Like, he wasn't like, wow. So maybe they stick with Winston. Even if they do, I think they should draft a quarterback. Personally, I think the Saints should draft a quarterback. Because part of me thinks they should start the rebuilding process, but they seem to not want to do that. And I think it just depends. If they think they can contend now, they're going to try and they're going to go after one of the veteran quarterbacks. If not, they're going to draft one, and they might fall in love with one of the quarterbacks. We'll see. But if they have not traded for a quarterback before the draft, they're going to draft one. I think in the first 2 rounds, I think they'll draft one at 18. And if I'm betting on one, I'm betting on Matt Corral. I could be wrong, but I think Matt Corral is going to land with the Saints as of right now. Kenny Pickett would be a good option if he's available at 18 because of playing in a dome for every home game. So with the 17-game schedule now, that's 8 to 9 dome games a year at home. And then you've also got one that you'll be playing in Atlanta every year, which Atlanta be an interesting spot for Pickett as well for the same reason. So you're guaranteed over half of your games every year to be in a dome with Pickett. That's good. And then your road games, other than Atlanta, are Tampa Bay, which the weather there is usually pretty good. You could run into rain, but otherwise, like, you're not looking at cold or snow. Same with Carolina, although it maybe not as warm and a little colder in the winter. You're looking at like 12 games a year that, should be favorable to him anyway. And maybe the ball size is not an issue for Pickett. That's what you're hoping for. But he's on that. He's right there where it's like this can be an issue. So my money is that Wilson stays. Speaking of Russell Wilson earlier, I think Russell Wilson stays. That offense is good for him. Give it a second year. He's not going to leave Seattle and get a massive upgrade on the weapons that he has. DK Metcalf only plays in Seattle, and he's a very unique talent. Tyler Lockett is great. They drafted Dwayne Eskridge last year. They have Perry Hart, who's a really interesting slot receiver that I really liked when coming out of college a couple years ago. Gerald Everett's is a good tight end. They need to invest in the offensive line and fix some of their issues on defense, but that can be done. And this organization has built a Super Bowl winner before. course, that was around Russell Wilson's rookie contract, but they did a great job of drafting back then too. So there's that. They just need picks. And this is a team that doesn't have their first round pick again this year because they traded for Jamal Adams. So I don't know. It's going to be tough again. But I think Russell Wilson stays. Rodgers is gone. We'll see where he goes. My money's on Denver. But I could see him ending up. If he doesn't end up in Denver, it'd be interesting to maybe see him in Philly. But I mean, because Philly has the assets to like throw a first round pick this year, and maybe there's next year, so they draft 2 guys this year in the first round. I don't know what the price would be for Aaron on the trade market. I can't imagine that it would be as it can't be as much as Watson, even though Watson is sat out, just because of Rodgers' age. I'd almost argue that Wilson also would be more expensive. And it does seem that teams not super excited like at the prospect of throwing like tons and tons of picks around. So there's that. I've gone an hour and a half. I'm trying to decide if I want to get into the draft stuff today. I might do the draft stuff tomorrow if I stream tomorrow or Thursday. I'm going to table, and I've talked a little bit about it, but I'm going to get into my QB rankings tomorrow or our next stream. And we're going to end with just some different news and notes type stuff. We know that Juwan Howard has been suspended by Michigan. I talked about that yesterday. Howard has been suspended, I think it was 5 games, which is like the rest of the regular season. And then he is... Yeah, so like the rest of the regular season for his outburst and misconduct after the University of Wisconsin beat them. So that happened. That's big. And there was another story I wanted to talk about, but I guess I can't remember it right now. So I think I'm going to end the stream there. I'm still getting used to getting back in the saddle. Hopefully, I'll get better at moving through points and being organized as I move forward. So, with that being said, hope y'all have a great rest of your day. I'm going to get off.